A young man named Tomonari Itsuki is sweating through a tough day of manual labor at a construction site. His foreman dismisses him, confirming it's his last day and that his wages will be paid up front. As he leaves, his coworkers notice a stream of luxury cars, realizing the elite Kiou Academy starts its new term today. Tomonari respectfully bows to his former colleagues, thanking them for the opportunity. The men watch him go, commenting on how the quiet kid works tirelessly to support his family. He walks home, filled with joy, knowing he's finally earned enough to pay his school fees and return for his second year. Arriving home, he cheerfully announces his plans to cook a celebratory feast for his parents with his earnings. He then discovers a simple, ominous note left behind with just 2 words written on it. Still smiling, he calls out to his parents, teasing them for sleeping in after another late night of games. His expression suddenly freezes as the silence of the empty house finally hits him. He tries to laugh it off, convinced his parents wouldn't just run away. But a neighbor confirms the worst, having seen them leave in a hurry late last night. The devastating truth sinks in. They abandoned him over their massive debts. He's left with only 200 yen, his hard-earned wages completely gone. His parents' gambling addiction was the real problem, and his work was just a band-aid. Now he's facing the impossible weight of rent, bills, and survival all on his own. He wonders if he can even afford to stay in school, let alone keep his home. He then overhears 2 girls in pristine uniforms talking about the elite Kiou Academy. The gap between his world and theirs feels like a cruel joke, until he spots something on the ground. He picks up a lost student ID for Kiou Academy, realizing it belongs to one of the girls. He runs to return the ID, only to find the girl being bound and gagged by 2 masked men. Stunned, he demands to know what they're doing, realizing he's stumbled upon a kidnapping. The kidnappers confront him, one warning him to stay out of it while the other questions his connection to the girl. Deciding they can't leave a witness, they violently drag him into their vehicle along with their target. The van speeds off into the distance, with both the girl and an unwilling Tomonari now inside. After arriving at a remote warehouse, his hands are cuffed to ensure he can't escape. He and the girl are chained together on the dirty floor, left to await their fate. Tomonari laments his terrible luck, only to overhear that his fellow captive is from the incredibly wealthy Konohana family. He attempts to explain his own poverty, but the kidnapper angrily dismisses him as just an unfortunate bonus. The captors fantasize about their massive payday, revealing the girl's family is worth 300 trillion yen. Tomonari silently listens to the kidnapper's greedy chatter, then glances over at his fellow captive. He's immediately struck by her refined beauty, feeling an instant, almost faded connection to the high-class lady. His mind catalogues her elegant features, from her clear eyes to her long, silky hair. He worries about her fate, his thoughts shifting from her grace to a surprisingly practical human concern. The girl turns to him with a blank expression and calmly voices the exact mundane thought he was having. He's taken aback, realizing that despite her wealth, she's still just a person with normal bodily functions. He reasons that her strange behavior must be a result of the immense stress of their kidnapping. She then calmly informs him that she can't hold it in any longer, her face betraying no emotion. Tomonari completely panics, shocked that she's focused on this instead of their life-threatening predicament. He desperately pleads with her to control herself for both their sakes as she looks back with an unreadable expression. One of the kidnappers, completely annoyed, tells her to just relieve herself in the corner. He then orders his partner to escort her, deciding it's better than making a mess in their hideout. She returns moments later and calmly reports her success, much to Tomonari's utter embarrassment. He's still reeling from her lack of shame when she immediately follows up with a polite request for tea. An irritated captor scoffs at her demand, tossing a single bottle of water on the ground instead. The kidnapper then points at Tomonari, ordering him to serve the girl, much to his disbelief. He watches in horror as she fumbles with the bottle, drenching herself completely in the process. Even the kidnappers are baffled by her incompetence, questioning if she's truly from a wealthy family. Tomonari, bewildered by her helplessness, offers to help her drink, wondering if all rich girls are this strange. She glares back, drenched and annoyed, fiercely refusing his help and calling him a nuisance. Tomonari calmly suggests they move away from the puddle she just created on the floor. She attempts to stand but immediately trips over her own feet with a pathetic yelp of pain. He stares in disbelief as she face plants onto the concrete, pulling the chain taut between them. The kidnappers watch in confusion, doubting she's a real Konohana lady due to her complete lack of grace. Tomonari processes their skepticism, a wry smile forming as he accepts the sheer absurdity of his situation. Kneeling beside her, he sighs in exasperation, asking if she can stand while thinking she's more trouble than his own parents. He gently checks her forehead for injuries, finding only a small scratch and tenderly warning her not to touch it. She quietly agrees, her expression softening as he finally asks why she was in that alley in the first place. He explains his whole predicament, revealing he was only there to return the student ID she had dropped moments before. She then produces a small beeping device, calmly announces that rescue is coming, and tells him to get some sleep. She leans over the flustered Tomari, calmly demanding to use his lap as a pillow. He stares back in disbelief, questioning why she can't just sleep on the concrete floor. Internally, he's shocked by her spoiled attitude, but decides to endure it, given their situation. She rests her head on his lap with a satisfied smile, confirming it's the perfect height. Tominari reluctantly allows it, remembering the kidnapper's order to take care of her. Just as he thinks she's settled, she opens her eyes and makes yet another strange request. She asks him to tell her an interesting story to pass the time, much to his exasperation. When he can't provide a story, she then asks for a lullaby, which he flatly refuses to sing. He's left completely baffled as she somehow manages to fall sound asleep moments later. He gently wipes drool from her face, marveling at how she can sleep so peacefully while a normal person would be crying. He realizes her odd behavior is somehow cutting through the grim atmosphere of their situation. She suddenly wakes up, and he admits her strange antics actually helped him calm down. Their moment is interrupted by an enraged kidnapper threatening her family over the phone. He warns them to stop provoking him as Tominari, and the girl listen with concern. She turns to Tominari, quietly asking why he would even consider trying to protect her. He gives her a reassuring smile, promising to do what he can if things get worse. She looks up at him, his unexpected resolve leaving her momentarily stunned. He explains that with his own future in shambles, saving someone feels like the one good thing he can still do. He credits her for this change of heart, but she just stares back, completely confused. She then compliments him, saying his casual nature is a refreshing change from her overly strict servants. He's left blushing and completely flustered by her unexpected praise. She then formally introduces herself as Konohana Hinako while receiving a covert status update from her rescue team. Cupping his face, she makes the stunning declaration that from this day forward, he belongs to her. Their moment is shattered as a flash grenade crashes through a nearby window, catching everyone by surprise. A heavily armed tactical team immediately storms the warehouse, disorienting the kidnappers with smoke. The two criminals are swiftly and efficiently subdued by the highly trained operatives. A woman in a maid uniform calmly oversees the operation, noting they've secured 3 suspects instead of the expected 2. The maid rushes to Hinako's side, her primary concern being the young lady's safety. Tominari stares in shock as the maid questions his presence, confused by the discrepancy in her intel. Hinako calmly clarifies the misunderstanding, informing her maid that Tominari is not one of their captors. The maid gently scolds Hinako, explaining that this entire mess could have been avoided. While unlocking her cuffs, she apologizes for the delayed rescue and firmly requests Hinako inform them of her plans next time. Tominari rubs his sore wrists, pointing out that he was also handcuffed, which should prove his innocence. The maid remains unconvinced, coolly suggesting he could have been a clever accomplice. Hinako interrupts, telling her maid to leave the cleanup to the team and insisting Tominari come with them. As a limousine pulls up, Hinako clarifies her intentions, stating she wants to take him, much to his confusion. Inside the car, she immediately leans against his shoulder to sleep, telling him to wake her when they get there. The maid sighs at the sight, then reaches over to buckle Tominari's seatbelt as if he were another child to look after. Observing his calm acceptance of the situation, she finally seems to understand her lady's peculiar interest in him. Tominari is left completely bewildered, with a sleeping heiress on his shoulder and no idea what's happening to his life. Tominari nervously asks their destination, only for the maid to announce she's just completed his background check. He panics at the invasion of his privacy, but she coolly warns him not to underestimate the Konohana information network. The maid proceeds to list every detail of his life, from his financial struggles to his parents' recent abandonment. She then informs him that he won't be able to return to his high school for the new term starting tomorrow. His eyes widen in shock as she reveals the simple reason. His tuition fee was never paid. The maid cruelly speculates that his parents likely planned to steal his hard-earned money all along. As he grapples with their betrayal, she reminds him that he'll soon be homeless on top of everything else. Seeing his utter desperation, the maid calmly states that she has a proposition for him.
She offers him a job, asking if he will come to work for her lady, Hinako.
Utterly lost, he can only listen as she prepares to explain, starting with the powerful Konohana group. He protests the invasion of his privacy, but the maid coolly points out his bank is owned by the Konohana group. She then reveals the sleeping girl is Konohana Hinako, the president's daughter and heir to the entire enterprise. The maid formally introduces herself as one of the staff dedicated to serving the young lady. While he wipes away more drool, the maid offers him the same job, serving the most powerful girl in the country. She elaborates on the Konohana group's immense power, a global zaibatsu worth 300 trillion yen. He nervously asks if she's asking him to be a maid, only for her to correct him, he'd be a butler. She clarifies that he'd technically be a caretaker since he lacks the formal training, but they're making an exception. The reason for this exception, she states flatly, is that her lady seems to have taken a particular liking to him. As if on cue, Hinako snuggles closer to his shoulder, leaving him completely flustered. He's suddenly overwhelmed by her sweet scent, his mind going blank from the close proximity. He's flustered by her closeness, wondering if she's even awake as she mumbles in her sleep. The maid's expression darkens as she delivers a chilling threat against him should he harm her lady. He nervously wonders what she intends to chop as she calmly defers the details of his employment to her boss. The limousine pulls up to a massive estate and the maid announces their arrival. Tominari's jaw drops at the sight of the Konohana villa, where a full staff awaits their return. He's completely awestruck by the lavish interior, prompting a curious look from the maid. He can't help but compare the mansion's grandeur to his own tiny apartment, which now feels like a closet. He explains his shock comes from their vastly different worlds, but the maid simply tells him to get used to it. Hinako sleepily declares she's going to bed, so the maid decides to give Tominari a tour. He internally admits he's not sure about the job, already feeling overwhelmed by this new reality. The head maid questions Hinako's sudden change of plans, asking if she's not going to bed after all. With a deadpan expression, Hinako confirms that she has no intention of sleeping just yet. She then announces she'll be staying with Tominari, shocking the entire household staff. The maid quickly recovers, formally addressing Tominari with respect and leading them both away. He whispers to another servant, wondering why everyone is so surprised, assuming she's just not tired from sleeping in the car. Hinako suddenly tugs on his hoodie, getting his attention without a word. She takes his hand to climb the grand staircase, prompting him to ask if she needs more help, which she silently refuses. The maid knocks on a large, ornate door, announcing their presence before leading them inside. A man's voice from within the opulent office immediately addresses Tominari by name. The man introduces himself as Konohana Kagen, Hinako's father and the president of the entire Konohana group. Kagen laughs off the maid's formality, claiming he was just joking to ease the tense atmosphere for Tominari. He then downplays his own importance, insisting he's just the president of a single company, not the whole group. The president questions Tominari, curious about what happened to make his daughter so attached to a complete stranger. His expression shifts to a serious one as he concludes that Hinako has clearly taken a strong liking to the boy. Tominari nervously denies doing anything special while wiping drool from the still sleeping Hinako's face. Kaigen theorizes that his daughter operates on pure intuition and must have sensed a good chemistry with Tominari. He elaborates that Hinako has always wanted a caretaker who would treat her as an equal, without fear or hesitation. The president admits that because of his status, he could never find such a person, making Tominari a lucky and valuable find. Tominari looks down at the sleeping girl, finally understanding her strange behavior might be a reaction to her strict upbringing. Kagan then snaps his fingers, deciding that before discussing the job, Tominari should first learn more about Hinako. The maid confirms the president's order, preparing to show Tominari a glimpse into Hinako's world. She begins by presenting an image of the prestigious Kiou Academy, explaining this is where Hinako spends her days. The projection shows Hinako being warmly greeted by fellow students who admire the school's grandeur. Tominari sees a completely different version of Hinako, poised, smiling, and radiating an almost perfect aura. In the classroom, she raises her hand with practiced elegance, ready to answer any question. The teacher calls on her, and she confidently accepts the challenge without a hint of hesitation. She effortlessly solves a complex equation on the board, earning applause and admiration from everyone in the room. After class, her popularity is clear as other students eagerly invite her to a tea party. Her simple acceptance sends the other girls into a state of delighted excitement. Hinako maintains her graceful composure, humbly telling another admirer that such special treatment isn't necessary. Tominari is completely flustered, muttering her name as she sleeps soundly on his shoulder. He asks who this Konohana-san is, only for the maid to clarify they're talking about Lady Hinako. He scoffs in disbelief, realizing the perfect lady persona is just an act she puts on for others. He points shakily at the girl beside him, unable to believe she's the same person from the video. The president explains that her behavior changes drastically when she's not in the public eye. The projection shows the real Hinako, slumped over a desk and refusing to go to class because she's tired. In another clip, a classmate desperately tries to get her to change for her next class. Hinako just holds up her gym clothes, blankly demanding her classmate dress her instead. Another memory shows her face down in the dirt, casually mentioning she dropped something there months ago. The final clip reveals her classmate getting a frantic call about unauthorized charges on Hinako's credit card. The president calmly explains that this is just Hinako in her natural habitat, much to Tominari's utter shock. The maid casually adds that the classmate in the video was her previous caretaker, who quit after being hospitalized from stress. She summarizes that while Hinako can act like a perfect lady in public, she's a complete hedonist in private. This extreme fluctuation between her on and off states requires someone who can manage both sides of her personality. Kagan makes it personal, revealing that Hinako herself requested Tominari and that accepting would be a favor to him. Tominari, overwhelmed by his situation, bluntly admits that he's completely penniless and desperate. With Hinako still leaning on him, he cuts straight to the point and asks if he'll actually get paid for this job. He stands his ground, his direct question hanging in the air as he awaits a response. The president's expression shifts into a confident smile, clearly impressed by the boy's straightforwardness. Kagan lays out the generous offer, a place to live, 3 meals a day, and a salary of $20,000. Kagan misinterprets his shock and casually raises the daily salary offer to a staggering $50,000. Tominari internally calculates that even the initial offer is several times his old salary, realizing the immense wealth he's dealing with. The president asks him to name his price, but Tominari timidly admits he'd be happy with a fraction of what was offered. Kagan's demeanor shifts as he asks if Tominari truly understands the reason behind Hinako's perfect lady facade. He warns that the responsibilities of this job are far more serious than Tominari could possibly imagine. The president reveals the ultimate purpose of her act, to secure the perfect husband for the future of the family. He confesses that the Konohana group is facing stagnation, making Hinako's role as the heir more critical than ever. To maintain their powerful image, Hinako has been forced to play the part of the perfect successor since she was a child. But Kagan admits he can't change her true personality, showing a memory of her collapsing from the effort. He clarifies that the caretaker's real job is to manage her public persona and hide her true lazy nature from the world. Kagan emphasizes that the caretaker's primary duty is to protect the Konohana family brand at all costs. After the intense discussion concludes, the president cuts to the chase and asks Tominari to name his desired salary. Tominari recalls the outcome, his mind still reeling from settling on a daily wage of $20,000. Now alone in his new room, he sits on the bed and lets out a heavy sigh, processing the day's events. He remembers the president's final condition, expecting him to work hard enough to justify the generous pay. His thoughts are cut short as the still sleeping Hinako suddenly leans her full weight against him. He holds her squished face, completely stunned as she continues to drool on his hand without a care. In a flashback, Tominari nervously asks her father if he'd be fired for laying a hand on her. The president's friendly demeanor vanishes, replaced by a cold glare as he promises a far more permanent consequence. The memory of that terrifying threat sends Tominari collapsing to his knees in sheer terror. He reflects that he wasn't concerned with pride or marriage. His only thought was survival. His thoughts are interrupted as the maid asks if his new servants' quarters are to his liking. Looking out the window, he's overwhelmed by the stark contrast between this new world and his old one. She turns and formally congratulates him on his employment, making his new reality sink in. The maid introduces herself as Tsurumi Shizune, his new guide, before instructing him to change into his uniform. He emerges wearing the pristine Kiou Academy uniform, which Shizune confirms is a perfect fit. Flustered, he questions if he's actually expected to attend the most elite school in the country. Shizune explains that since the previous caretaker quit, he must enroll to watch over Hinako during school hours. He spirals into a panic, realizing he has none of the manners or social grace required for such a place. Standing in his lavish new room, he expresses his doubt that anyone would befriend a poverty beggar like him. Shizune leans in close, startling Tominari as she asks if he's nervous about his new role. With a confident smile, she reminds him that as Hinako's maid, it's her job to whip him into shape. She hands him a document, instructing him to first review his new fabricated resume. The maid explains that since servants are forbidden at Kiou Academy, they've given him an official corporate identity. He reads the file, discovering he's no longer a commoner, but the successor to a Konohana branch company. Tominari realizes this elaborate cover story will make it difficult for anyone to guess his true purpose. Shizune clarifies that this backstory makes his subservience to Hinako seem natural, deflecting any potential suspicion. She then hands him a towering stack of books, introducing it as his official caretaker manual. The maid explains that all his school supplies are provided, and she expects him to study hard to earn her trust. As he struggles under the weight, she warns him that he'll need all this knowledge to survive among the elite students of Kiou Academy. She then lays out his grueling new schedule, which includes constant studying to keep up with Hinako's academic level. The maid adds that his training will cover not just academics, but also proper etiquette and self-defense. Tominari is taken aback by the last requirement, questioning why he would need to learn how to fight. Shizune smirks at his reaction, mockingly asking if the idea of combat training frightens him. He quickly composes himself, confidently declaring that his past labor jobs have given him more than enough stamina for any test. His bravado is immediately shattered as Shizune effortlessly throws him to the ground during their first lesson. Completely humbled, he bows in utter defeat, begging for the sweet release of death. He realizes with dawning horror that the combat maid dispatched him with terrifying ease. Shizune calmly stands over his broken form, announcing that their training for the day is complete. Utterly drained, Tominari collapses onto his bed, questioning his ability to survive before passing out from exhaustion. He tries to steel himself for the tough road ahead, only to be startled by Hinako suddenly appearing in his bed. As he questions her presence, a mental note from Shizune reminds him to adopt a more formal way of speaking. He confronts the sleeping girl, pointing out that she has invaded his personal space and taken over his bed. She mumbles in her sleep, casually declaring that as her caretaker, his bed is now her property. A light bulb goes off as he remembers the caretaker manual and desperately searches for a solution. He reads that Hinako sleeps constantly at home and waking her will result in a very bad mood. The realization hits him that he's already broken a cardinal rule by disturbing her. He paces nervously, completely unsure how to handle the delicate situation he's found himself in. His phone buzzes and he checks it with a look of utter exhaustion, expecting more trouble. He's surprised to see a text from the supposedly sleeping Hinako asking if they can go to school. He realizes with a jolt that he completely forgot to tell his friend Yuri about his sudden change in schools. He sends a vague text explaining he can't go back, only to be met with Yuri's confused and annoyed replies. As Yuri's insistent calls and texts flood his screen, Hinako suddenly appears over his shoulder. Startled, he confirms she was awake the whole time as she calmly asks about the person contacting him. Before he can react, Hinako swiftly snatches the phone right out of his hands. She examines the device with a deadpan expression, now in complete control of the situation. Hiding under the covers, she announces she's confiscating his phone for the sake of peace. She then adds that she dislikes his overly formal tone and orders him to speak normally. When he pleads for his phone back, she gives a simple, muffled refusal from her blanket fort. After a moment of stunned silence, he awkwardly reverts to his old way of speaking, asking if she's satisfied. She gives him an ultimatum from under the covers: speak normally or she keeps his phone. Hinako peeks out with a sweet smile, happily admitting that her demand is indeed quite bold. She then catches him off guard by casually calling him by his first name, Itsuki. He stares back, completely stunned by her sudden familiarity and forwardness. Tucked back into her blanket, she softly wishes him a good day for their first day of school tomorrow. A flustered Tominari can only manage a shy agreement, thrown off by her gentle tone. He tries to offer to carry her back to her room, only to find she's instantly fallen asleep again. The next morning, Shizune waits by the car, immediately beginning his etiquette training with a pop quiz. She tests his knowledge of seating arrangements, which he correctly identifies for a chauffeured car. He then correctly recalls the rule change for when a companion is driving, showing he's been studying. Shizune gives a rare, satisfied smile, impressed by his quick learning. The entire household staff lines up to see them off, bowing deeply as the car departs. He smugly credits his success to Shizune's intense training methods. As they drive towards the academy, Hinako immediately complains about being tired. She blankly requests to go home, but Shizune flatly informs her that school is non-negotiable for the next 8 hours. He nervously asks about their living situation, and Shizune explains their cover story requires separate residences. She reassures him that even though he'll be dropped off alone, Konohana agents will always be watching from a distance. Shizune then gives him his first official order: prevent Hinako from ever sneaking off on her own again. Hinako immediately notices his stiff formal speech, staring at him with an unimpressed expression. She then orders Shizune to make him stop, but the maid refuses, insisting on proper protocol. Shizune reluctantly agrees, allowing him to speak casually only when the three of them are alone. Hinako leans in close, smugly informing Itsuki that he's earned the rare privilege of talking to her normally. The maid immediately adds a strict condition, warning him to maintain formal speech at school to avoid trouble. Hinako then leans on his shoulder again, softly calling his name and leaving him completely flustered. As they approach the academy, she begins stretching and whining, already dreading the day ahead. She suddenly demands he carry her, a request he flatly denies, only for her to make a weird comment about his scent. Shizune processes this strange new information with a cold, calculating look. The maid then asks for a sample of his scent for future reference, which he loudly refuses as Hinako sniffs his shoulder. Arriving at the school, he steps out and notes that Konohana bodyguards are likely watching from every shadow. Before departing, Shizune hands him a mysterious device, instructing him to use it if Hinako becomes too difficult to handle. Shizune bows deeply, leaving Tomonari with a mysterious bag and a look of utter confusion. With a final word of encouragement, the maid departs, leaving him and Hinako alone at the school gates. The moment they start walking, Hinako's perfect posture vanishes as she immediately complains about wanting to go home. He reminds her about her public image, but she just wobbles unsteadily, claiming she can relax since no one is watching. Tomonari realizes she has some kind of internal radar for when she can drop her act, making his job even harder. His eyes widen in shock as he finally takes in the full view of his new surroundings. He nervously comments on the academy's grand reputation, feeling completely out of his depth. The sheer, imposing scale of the prestigious Kiou Academy leaves him utterly speechless. The instant other students appear, Hinako transforms into a smiling, graceful lady, greeting them with perfect poise. Tomonari watches from the sidelines, stunned as her admirers praise her elegance, unable to reconcile this with the girl from moments ago. Hinako leans in close, asking the startled Tomonari if something is the matter with her perfect lady voice. He internally marvels at her complete transformation, unable to reconcile this elegant girl with the one who drooled on him last night. As they head to the staff room, other students whisper in awe of Hinako's flawless presence. She calmly tells him it's time to go, and he nervously agrees, trying his best to keep up with her act. Inside, they're greeted by their new homeroom teacher, Fukushima Misono, who has been expecting him. Tomonari puts on a charming smile, formally introducing himself as Hinako stands serenely by his side. The teacher curiously asks if he and the famous Konohana-san are already acquainted. Hinako smoothly explains their cover story, claiming their families are close and she's been assigned to be his guide. Fukushima-sensei is impressed, telling Tomonari he's incredibly lucky to have such a wonderful guide. As the teacher directs them to class, Tomonari privately notes that this perfect guide would likely get lost without him. He sarcastically agrees with the teacher, internally laughing at the idea of being lucky to have Hinako as a guide. Standing before his new classmates, he formally introduces himself as Tomonari Itsuki. He notes the mature and welcoming atmosphere, a stark contrast to what he might have expected. The teacher points him to an empty desk, and he politely makes his way to his new seat. Fukushima-sensei cheerfully begins the math lesson, eager to get the class started. The academic rigor immediately hits him as the teacher dives into an advanced topic for second-year students. He panics internally, realizing they're covering material he wouldn't have seen for another year and a half. Utterly drained, he thanks his stars for Shizune's brutal training, which was the only reason he could follow along at all. The bell rings, marking the end of the first period and offering him a moment of reprieve. Taking a breath, he discreetly checks on Hinako, wondering how she's faring in her perfect lady mode. He's relieved she's holding up her act, only to be interrupted by a classmate calling him out. Meanwhile, another student approaches Hinako, respectfully asking for help with the difficult lesson. A confident young man gets in Tominari's face, calling him arrogant for not greeting him first. He then bizarrely demands tributes, leaving Tominari completely stunned by the strange request. The tense moment is broken by a swift smack to the back of the demanding student's head. A cheerful girl appears, scolding the boy for trying to intimidate the new transfer student. The boy sheepishly apologizes, admitting his strange hazing ritual was just a bad joke. The pair then properly introduce themselves as Taisho Katsuya and Asa Karen. Katsuya leans in, pointing out that he noticed Tominari was struggling to keep up during the lesson. Tominari is visibly unnerved, realizing his every move was being carefully watched from the start. Katsuya laughs it off, reassuring the flustered Tominari that this kind of hazing is a common welcome for new students. Karen then asks about his family's business, prompting him to give a vague answer about a small IT company. She correctly guesses he's from a commoner background, a term that catches him slightly off guard. Karen explains that all new students at the academy tend to fall into one of two distinct categories. She clarifies they're either academic elites from wealthy families or commoners admitted under special circumstances. Katsuya points out that the advanced curriculum is incredibly difficult for anyone transferring from a normal school. He explains that because of this, students from similar backgrounds naturally group together to support one another. The pair then cheerfully reveal they're also commoners, offering to be Tominari's support system. Tominari nervously realizes they're trying to welcome him into their commoner clique, complicating his secret mission. He quickly puts on a charming smile, deciding to play his part for the sake of his generous pay and new life. Katsuya leans in conspiratorially, telling Tominari he has a question for him. Tominari plays along with a smile, wondering why his new friend is suddenly being so formal. Katsuya scratches his head, trying to act casual before getting to his real point. His friendly facade drops instantly as he demands to know Tominari's relationship with Hinako. Tominari flinches at the intense interrogation, as Katsuya reveals he saw them arrive together. He quickly falls back on his cover story, claiming their parents are close and she was just guiding him. Katsuya's suspicion deepens, pressing to know if they're secretly engaged. The unexpected accusation leaves Tominari completely speechless and wide-eyed. The tension shatters as Katsuya bursts out laughing, playfully scolding Tominari for taking his joke so seriously. While Tominari tries to recover, Katsuya still seems fixated on the idea of him being Hinako's fiancé. Karen wipes her brow, commenting on how tense that moment was. She then explains the reasoning behind their intense questioning. Karen reveals that despite Hinako's immense popularity, there have never been any rumors about her love life. This has led the student body to speculate that she must already be engaged. So when Tominari arrived with her, they naturally assumed he was the mysterious fiancé. Another classmate chimes in, explaining that while he hasn't heard anything official, the possibility of an engagement still exists. He glances over at Hinako, thoughtfully considering the implications of her family's search for a suitor. Katsuya then cheerfully offers to help Tominari navigate the school's social landscape. He then proudly announces his own single status, much to Karen's visible irritation. Tominari breathes a sigh of relief, thinking his first day is going surprisingly well despite the initial interrogation. Katsuya points out the old abandoned student council building, a place Tominari seems to be heading towards. He turns down Katsuya's lunch invitation, instead entering the deserted building alone. Tominari makes an excuse about needing to call his family, heading up the stairs to find some privacy. Katsuya watches him go, assuming this secretive behavior is typical for someone in Hinako's circle. The other students gossip, speculating that Hinako also disappears at lunch to handle important family business. But Tominari finds her sitting alone on a landing, casually greeting him as if she was waiting. He's caught off guard and stammers a formal greeting, still trying to maintain his professional distance. Hinako immediately shuts down his polite act, bluntly telling him to speak normally. He then notices she's completely failing to eat her lunch, dropping food from her chopsticks. With a sigh, he offers to feed her, finally grasping the full extent of her helplessness and why his job is so necessary. He feeds her a bite, and she beams with satisfaction while he asks about her choice of lunch spot. She explains that she prefers this deserted landing because it allows her to avoid unwanted attention. Hinako adds that a packed lunch lets her avoid any food she doesn't like, which piques his curiosity. She then lists off an entire grocery aisle of vegetables, confirming his suspicion that she's just a picky eater. With a charming smile, she playfully admits that he's caught on to her little secret. As he continues to feed her, he can't help but wonder what his new classmates would think of her true personality. She then gently wipes a stray grain of rice from his cheek as he confesses his struggle with the school's advanced curriculum. Tomari nervously agrees that falling behind academically would be a very bad look for him. Hinako leans in with a serious expression, warning him that poor grades could get him fired from his new job. The weight of her words hits him, just as she gestures to his own untouched lunchbox, reminding him to eat. He opens his own lunchbox, revealing a bento so luxurious it practically glows. Tomonari stares in disbelief, questioning if a commoner like him is even allowed to eat something so fancy. The first bite sends him into a state of pure bliss, his mind reeling from the incredible flavor. When she asks for his favorite part, he admits the simple egg roll was the best thing he tasted. He's caught off guard when she offers him something in return for his honest opinion. Hinako holds out a piece of food with her chopsticks, insisting on feeding him to return the favor. The unexpected intimacy sends him into a blushing, stammering mess. He tries to calm himself down, noting her completely blank expression means this is just another one of her whims. He awkwardly accepts the bite, the moment feeling far too close for comfort. She innocently asks if he likes it, while he's still trying to process her giving him her own food. He suddenly asks a pointed question, wondering about the caretakers who came before him. She explains her actions with deadpan logic, stating that as his master, she must ensure he likes her. Hinako then casually reveals the short tenures of her previous staff, none of whom lasted more than a month. As he continues to feed her, he asks why they all quit, but she simply claims to have no idea. He questions why anyone would leave such a great job, prompting her to ask what he means by a good offer. Tomonari reflects on his incredible pay and benefits, concluding that despite the difficulty, it's the best job he's ever had. She interrupts his train of thought, pointedly asking what he thinks of her as part of the deal. Hinako leans in, bluntly questioning if he has any interest in marrying into a wealthy family, which completely short-circuits his brain. Her expression softens as she makes a quiet, almost vulnerable plea for him not to quit. He stammers awkwardly, trying to explain that he's not worthy of standing beside someone of her immense status. He's stunned to find she's instantly fallen asleep after her heartfelt plea. She then proceeds to crawl onto his lap, getting comfortable without a second thought. Resigned to his fate, he tiredly asks if she'd like him to be her pillow. She confirms his lap is very comfortable, much to his bemused surprise. He reflects that while the situation feels improper, it's also strangely exciting as she rolls around. He smiles, accepting that their relationship is far more complicated than just master and servant. The quiet moment is interrupted by a call from Shizune, buzzing from his pocket. The maid immediately scolds him for his slow response time, demanding he answer faster next time. She explains that she's only being tolerant of the delay because he's currently on school grounds. Shizune then reveals she'll be checking in regularly until he's fully settled into his new position. Tomonari awkwardly explains to Shizune that her lady is currently using his lap as a pillow. When asked about his first day, he admits the school's advanced curriculum is his only real concern. He mentions the short tenure of past caretakers, which only earns him more supplementary classes from a deadpan Shizune. Shizune explains that Hinako disliked her previous caretakers because they were her father's employees and acted too much like servants. She confirms that every caretaker before him was already a subordinate of the Konohana group. The maid clarifies that Hinako doesn't hate servants, just the overly formal and tense atmosphere they create. Shizune reveals that Tomonari is the first commoner ever hired for the role, making him a unique experiment. Changing the subject, she asks about his new classmates, and he mentions getting along with Karen and Katsuya. The maid files their names away, her expression suggesting she's already running background checks. Tomonari adds that they're commoners, only for Shizune to reveal that Katsuya's family company is actually quite well known. Shizune continues her briefing, revealing Karen's family owns a trading company called G's Holdings. Tomonari panics, recognizing the name as a famous corporation whose products he's actually purchased. The name G's Denki sinks in, and he realizes his definition of commoner is wildly different from theirs. He learns their small company is one of the top 5 electronics retailers in the entire country. Shizune then reveals Katsuya is from the equally famous Taishu Moving Company, confirming he's also rich. The truth hits him hard. He's been completely misled by his so-called commoner friends. The maid coldly instructs him to report any new acquaintances, keeping him on a tight leash. After the call, Hinako suddenly opens her eyes, asking what's bothering him with a curious look. He stammers that his confidence has been shattered, realizing she was awake and listening the whole time. A new fear dawns on him. If his true background is discovered, he could bring shame to the Konohana name. He finally works up the courage to ask her a question, and she looks up at him with curiosity. With his confidence at an all-time low, he bluntly asks why she chose him to be her caretaker. She takes a moment to thoughtfully consider his question, her expression unreadable. Hinako gives a simple, direct answer, explaining she chose him because she thought he was an honest person. Tomari is visibly flustered by her sincerity, unable to process the straightforward compliment. She elaborates with a gentle smile, admitting she likes that he helps her out of genuine kindness, not just duty. The school bell rings, and he's left completely stunned by her praise, wondering if she's even fully awake. Her sweet demeanor vanishes as she immediately complains about skipping class, a request he flatly denies. Back in the classroom, Katsuya fumbles a question, prompting the teacher to call on the ever-perfect Hinako. She flawlessly solves the problem at the board, earning praise from the teacher and admiration from her classmates. He's still amazed by her transformation, unable to believe this is the same girl who was throwing a tantrum earlier. As the bell rings, Karen playfully teases Katsuya for failing to answer the teacher's question. Katsuya brushes it off with a lame excuse, claiming he just happened to miss that one topic in his studies. Tomonari excuses himself to go to the restroom, glancing back at Hinako as he leaves. He reflects on the school's difficulty, realizing he'll need to study constantly just to survive here. He notices Hinako is also heading out, which immediately piques his suspicion. Before he can investigate, a group of girls intercepts Hinako, asking if she has a moment to spare. His thoughts are interrupted by a sudden buzz from the phone in his pocket. He answers the call from Shizune, who urgently informs him that Hinako has apparently dropped her wallet. Shizune explains the wallet's tracker is showing a different location, asking a worried Tomonari if he has any idea what's going on. Tomonari nervously reports to Shizune that the wallet's signal is coming from inside the girls' restroom. Shizune calmly deduces Hinako must be in there and orders a stunned Tomonari to retrieve the wallet for them. He protests the impossible task, but the maid's cold refusal over the phone makes it clear she's not joking. His argument is interrupted by a concerned voice as a new girl asks if someone needs help. The girl turns with a dazzling aura, her presence immediately commanding attention. Tomonari is completely caught off guard, stammering as he tries to process who she is. She strikes a confident pose, formally introducing herself as Tennoji Mirei. Mirei proudly declares her status as the sole daughter of the head of the powerful Tennoji group. Her grand introduction is met with Tomonari's blank, confused stare, which clearly surprises her. She immediately scolds him for his clueless reaction, questioning how he could possibly be unaware of her family's name. He awkwardly apologizes for his ignorance, which only seems to shock Mirei even more. She furiously declares that his cluelessness goes far beyond simple ignorance. Mirei begins a grand speech, explaining her family's control over iron ore and their status as top manufacturers. She then proudly claims her family is on the same massive scale as the Konohana group, but Tomonari seems unimpressed. Her frustration grows as she realizes he knows the Konohana name but not hers. Mirei's face flushes with pure indignation, completely offended by his lack of recognition. She clenches her fists, blaming the insolent Konohana Hinako for overshadowing her fame. Tomonari finally gets a word in, explaining that someone seems to have dropped their wallet in the girls' restroom. Her expression shifts as she asks what the problem is, her curiosity piqued by his strange predicament. With a confident air, she offers to retrieve the wallet for him, telling him to wait right there. Mirei returns with the wallet, and Tomonari expresses his immense gratitude. Her helpfulness vanishes as she suspiciously questions how he knew the wallet was in the girls' restroom. He realizes she's Hinako's rival and decides revealing the wallet's owner would be a huge mistake. Tomonari quickly concocts a lie, claiming the owner asked him to search and he simply deduced its location. Unimpressed, Mirei looks down on him, disdainfully labeling him as a simple errand boy. He stammers an apology, which she immediately criticizes for its utter lack of confidence. She then lectures him on the importance of standing up for himself to succeed among the academy's elite. Her stern demeanor suddenly melts into a warm smile as she praises his potential. Completely flustered by her encouragement, he loudly promises to be more careful from now on. She advises him to fix his posture, explaining that his confidence is directly tied to it. Mirei offers her future assistance, proudly showing off her golden locks. Tominari is left speechless by her over-the-top confidence. He cautiously asks if her hair color violates the school's strict dress code. Her confident facade shatters as she blushes and denies dyeing her hair. She stammers, completely offended by the implication that her hair isn't natural. Her bravado crumbles and she meekly asks if it would be wrong for her to dye it. She shouts a final denial before fleeing in embarrassment as Tominari realizes he's busted her. The school day finally ends and the other students begin to head home. Karen cheerfully approaches him, suggesting they celebrate his first day with a party. Katsuya claps him on the shoulder, congratulating him on surviving his first day at the academy. Tominari politely declines their party invitation, explaining he has to head home immediately. He smoothly suggests they hang out another time, claiming he'd love to learn more about the school from them. Katsuya and Karen cheerfully agree, waving him off until tomorrow. With his new friends gone, Tominari packs up, his focus shifting back to his primary duty, seeing Hinako off. He catches up to her by the waiting car, formally apologizing for the delay. But Hinako suddenly detours to the school store, leaving him to wonder about her change of plans. He follows her to a secluded, ornate building surrounded by a lush rose garden. Peeking through the bushes, he's startled by a massive koi leaping from a hidden pond. He finds Hinako sitting by the water, blankly tossing pieces of bread to the swarming fish. When he asks what she's doing, she deadpans that she's simply feeding the fish, as if it's the most normal thing in the world. He watches her, thinking she must have a gentle soul to appreciate animals so much. Tominari blushes, concluding she has an innocent love for nature and art. His sweet image is shattered when she reveals she's just jealous the fish get fed without any effort. He tries to get her moving, reminding her that Shizune is waiting for them by the car. She ignores him, instead launching into a strange philosophical tangent about the secret struggles of fish. When he presses the issue, she gives him a simple, firm refusal. Her mood brightens as she explains that with fewer people around, she can finally relax and be herself. He points out she could relax at home, but she slumps over, complaining about her endless private lessons. Tominari realizes that for the students of Kiou Academy, there's no time for clubs or fun after school. Hinako suddenly goes limp, forcing a struggling Tominari to try and physically drag her off the ground. He tries to lift her, insisting they can't stay at school forever and must go home. Tominari warns her that delaying the inevitable will only make things more difficult for her later. She immediately collapses back onto the grass, completely ignoring his plea. He stands over her, trying to devise a new plan to get the uncooperative girl to move. A memory of Shizune's parting words suddenly gives him a brilliant idea. He pulls out the mysterious bag, and the rustling sound immediately gets Hinako's attention. Her eyes sparkle with pure delight as she sees the bag of potato chips inside. He offers the chips as a bribe, and she struggles mightily against the overwhelming temptation. Tominari dangles the snack like a prize, amazed by her comically desperate reaction. The bribe works perfectly, and she happily munches on her reward in the car on the way home. The car pulls up to his new residence and Tominari steps out, the sound of the door creaking behind him. Shizune apologizes for the wait as she gets out of the car, having dropped Hinako off first. Back inside, he confirms to the maid that their plan to maintain separate appearances worked perfectly. He internally reviews their strategy, parting ways at the school gate to hide the fact they're going to the same home. His thoughts are interrupted as he notices Hinako is making a complete mess with her snack. She calmly justifies her messiness, claiming that spilling crumbs is the proper way to enjoy chips. He turns to Shizune, completely baffled by how someone can be so inept at eating a simple snack. The maid explains with a knowing smile that this is Hinako's favorite treat, and her clumsiness makes it a perfect tool for manipulation. Shizune elaborates that such an unhealthy meal is forbidden for a lady of her status, despite being just potatoes. Tominari realizes that being rich comes with its own strict rules, recalling Kagen's order that enforces this strange diet. Hinako blankly demands food, comparing herself to one of the fish she was just feeding. He feeds her a chip as Shizune sternly warns him to keep this indulgence a secret from her father. Tominari nervously agrees, realizing the delicate balance he must maintain in this new life. With the day over, his focus shifts to the grueling task of preparing for his next day at the academy. His training continues with a harsh etiquette lesson, where he's immediately corrected on proper dining manners. Shizune then moves on to combat training, acknowledging his physical strength before preparing to spar. The lesson begins with an impossibly difficult warm-up, demonstrating the brutal intensity of his new regimen. During their spar, she effortlessly dodges his attack, calmly pointing out how predictable his movements are. She easily pins him to the mat, explaining that his untrained fighting style is useless against a real threat. He begs for a break from the relentless training, but the combat maid coldly refuses his plea. 2 hours later, the brutal training session finally comes to an end. Tominari collapses in a formal bow, completely drained but still managing to thank his instructor. Shizune thoughtfully observes him, admitting that he's actually a surprisingly quick learner. She offers him a hand, suggesting he has real potential if he hones his fighting abilities. He looks up with a hopeful blush, flustered by the unexpected compliment. Her praise is short-lived as she immediately points out his complete failure at learning proper etiquette. Shizune then hands him a waterproof file containing detailed profiles of all his classmates. She orders him to wash up and he meekly agrees, still recovering from the intense workout. Even in the bath, he's forced to study, motivating himself with the thought of his incredible daily salary. The maid then casually mentions she's already spoken to a girl from another class named Tennoji. Shizune's expression darkens as she asks if he had an encounter with Tennoji Mirei. He confirms their meeting, completely unaware of the implications of his answer. The maid reveals that Mirei and Hinako are rumored to be rivals, making any interaction a delicate situation. She explains that with their families being corporate equals, a natural tension exists between the two girls. Tominari walks down the hall, processing the complex social dynamics he's been thrown into. He scratches his head, concluding their relationship is just another complicated mess he has to navigate. His thoughts are interrupted when he finds Hinako standing silently by a window and asks if she's okay. She turns to him with a surprisingly serious look, calling him by his first name. Hinako then leans in and bluntly informs the flustered Tominari that he smells of sweat. Before he can react, she takes his hand, offering to lead him to the bath to freshen up. He tries to explain he's heading to his own room for a bath, but she keeps pulling him forward. Ignoring his protests, she leads him down the hall with a determined blank expression. They stop before a grand set of doors, which she calmly identifies as her own room. He steps inside and is immediately overwhelmed by the sheer size and luxury of her personal quarters. Tominari marvels at the opulent decor, realizing his own new room is nothing in comparison. She then reveals her private bath, a massive, ornate pool that leaves him completely speechless. He finally questions her motives, but she just holds her nightgown with a serene look. The absurdity of the situation hits him, leaving him frozen in utter confusion. Hinako looks up with a surprisingly direct gaze, suggesting they bathe together. His brain short-circuits from the bold invitation, completely missing the shadowy figure spying on them from a doorway. He's left speechless as Hinako emerges in a swimsuit, ready for their shared bath. Tominari tries to rationalize the situation, concluding a bath this massive would be lonely for one person. She sinks into the warm water with a blissful expression, trying to calm her own racing heart. He struggles to stay focused, admitting to himself that Hinako's appearance is undeniably charming. She curiously leans over his shoulder, asking what he's studying so intently in the bath. When he asks if she has any friends in class, she gives him a simple, direct no. He reads the files, realizing with a jolt that every student is the heir to a powerful family. Tominari points out her popularity in class, but she coldly clarifies that none of them are her friends. He's taken aback by the speed and certainty of her lonely declaration. Tominari concludes that her special status isolates her from everyone for better or for worse. He concludes that her classmates aren't friends, but more like followers orbiting her powerful status. Tominari gently asks if she's ever wished for a real friend, prompting a thoughtful silence from Hinako. She leans in with a sweet smile, confessing that as long as he's with her, she doesn't need anyone else. Hinako suddenly stands up, her proximity leaving a blushing Tominari completely flustered. He tries to rationalize her forwardness, deciding to interpret it as a sign of her immense trust in him. Her next move catches him off guard as she sits down and bluntly orders him to wash her hair. He protests, but she calmly explains that this is a task Shizune normally performs for her. The intimate request makes him gulp, his face flushing as he weighs his options. She reminds him that as her caretaker, this is part of his job, leaving him with no choice but to comply. He reluctantly begins washing her hair, noting how soft and different it feels as he tries to remain professional. His professional composure shatters as Hinako complains about the heat and starts removing her swimsuit top. She then points out the absurdity of wearing a swimsuit in a bath to begin with. Tominari has a mental breakdown, realizing the real issue is them bathing together in the first place. Hinako casually reveals she only wore the swimsuit because Shizune was so insistent. The implication hits him like a ton of bricks and he freezes in place. He asks if the maid knew about their shared bath, and Hinako confirms it as Shizune's eyes watch from the doorway. The realization that this was all part of the maid's plan sends him into a full-blown panic. He tries to regain his cool as Hinako giggles, finding his touch ticklish. Outside the door, a terrifyingly intense Shizune nods in silent, creepy approval. He finally finishes rinsing her hair, only for a pleased Hinako to suggest this become their new daily routine. Hinako looks up with a soft blush, sweetly requesting this become their nightly ritual. The thought of this happening every night sends a flustered Tominari into a panic as Hinako is led away. He sweats, realizing with dawning horror that the maid had been watching them the entire time. Shizune confirms his fears, calmly admitting she saw everything while giving him a chillingly professional, "good job." After directing him to his clothes, she hands him a mysterious bottle of pills, leaving him utterly confused. She explains with a deadpan expression that the pills are a precaution to ensure his professional conduct. The shocking implication of her words sends his mind into a dizzying spiral. He recoils in horror as she instructs him to take one anytime he feels he might lose his composure around Hinako. His panicked mind conjures a bizarre fantasy of the pill's side effects, imagining a complete loss of his identity. The next day, the scene shifts to gym class, where the teacher announces a joint badminton lesson for the second-year students. Katsuya casually points out Tominari's muscular build, catching him completely off guard. He blushes, sheepishly crediting his physique to occasional training rather than his past life of manual labor. Tominari is then completely floored by the sheer scale of the gym, which Katsuya confirms is the size of an event hall. As the teacher gives instructions, he mentally prepares for his first-ever PE class at the prestigious academy. He gets himself fired up, determined to make a good impression as he begins his warm-up stretches. His natural athleticism and surprising flexibility immediately stand out during the warm-up exercises. Taking a break, he breathes a sigh of relief, realizing that PE is one area where he might actually be able to keep up. Their rest is cut short as Karen approaches with a friendly wave, badminton racket in hand. She gives him a knowing smile, admitting she was watching and is impressed by his skills on the court. Flattered by the praise, he confidently returns the compliment, noting that she seems pretty skilled herself. Karen brushes off the compliment, explaining she's good at skating, and Tominari adds that he's also quite athletic. He clarifies his skill is just good balance, then correctly guesses Katsuya is a golfer from accompanying his father. Tominari is stunned, realizing the academy's PE curriculum includes elite sports far beyond his experience. His shock deepens when another student casually mentions that second years also play polo on horseback. Feeling completely out of his depth, he realizes he can't afford to skip Shizune's lessons as his friends watch an intense match unfold. The focus shifts to a determined but sweating Hinako, who has just lost a point in her own badminton game. Her classmates shower her with praise from the sidelines, calling her an inspiration for excelling in everything. Karen points out that Hinako isn't the only talented athlete in their class, drawing Tominari's attention. He internally marvels at Hinako's abilities, admitting she's even more skilled than the rumors suggested. The game concludes as another girl, Miyakojima, is declared the winner, leaving Tominari surprised by the unexpected outcome. Karen introduces the winner as Miyakojima Narika, another one of the school's top athletes. She adds that while less famous than Hinako, many believe Miyakojima is actually the superior athlete. Miyakojima is known as the Academy's greatest cool beauty, but Karen hints there's more to her than that. Two classmates nervously try to approach the stoic-looking Miyakojima after her match. They immediately backpedal in terror, stammering apologies as if they've just provoked a wild animal. It turns out they only tried to compliment her, but her flustered, intense reaction sent them running. Miyakojima clenches her fist, completely overwhelmed with embarrassment from the simple praise. Karen explains that Miyakojima has a reputation for being scary because she's always silent and tense. Katsuya chimes in with rumors that she's secretly part of a gang or a Yakuza family. Karen laughs, recalling how every time she tried to talk to Miyakojima, the girl would just make an excuse and flee. Tominari quietly processes the rumors about Miyakojima as his friends head off for their turn on the court. After an exhausting gym class, he glances back to check on Hinako as they walk down the hall. He sees her gracefully accepting a challenge from another student, perfectly maintaining her public image. Tominari concludes he doesn't need to worry about her, as she's always surrounded by admirers. He quickly makes an excuse about forgetting his shoes, needing a moment to himself. Back in the empty changing room, he easily locates his forgotten footwear. As he grabs his shoes, his thoughts drift back to the mysterious and intense Miyakojima. A sudden flashback takes him back to his first meeting with Hinako's imposing father, Kagen. He recalls Kagen revealing that he'd already run a background check on Tominari's family. The memory ends with a stern warning from Kagen about the presence of a Miyakojima family member at the academy. Kagen's stern warning echoes in his mind, ordering him to avoid all contact with the Miyakojima girl. As he rushes out of the changing room, he accidentally collides with the very person he was just thinking about. He's taken aback when she expresses genuine concern, asking if he's all right after their collision. Tominari freezes, recognizing the stoic girl from gym class as Miyakojima Narika. Remembering his orders, he quickly tries to excuse himself and make a hasty retreat. She stops him in his tracks, unexpectedly asking if his name is Itsuki. He panics, offering a swift and unconvincing denial while trying to get away. Miyakojima looks down with a dejected expression, seemingly accepting his answer. Her cool facade suddenly shatters as she erupts in a flustered, frantic outburst, calling out his name. She then points his own shoe at him like evidence, declaring with absolute certainty that he is Itsuki. Before he can escape, she tackles him in an emotional embrace, crying out his name. They crash to the floor as she confesses how much she's missed him all this time. A flustered Tominari decides to explain their shared history as a flashback begins. The memory reveals they knew each other as children when he lived with the Miyakojima family. Back in the present, she's still on top of him, completely overwhelmed by their reunion. Miyakojima is so overcome with emotion that she can barely speak, her face flushed with tears. He gently pats her head, calling her by her first name with a look of weary acceptance. Tominari confirms he was indeed in her family's care for a short time in the past. She leans into his touch, still emotional as she softly calls his name again. The flashback continues, revealing his parents' marriage was so strained it nearly ended in divorce. He continues his explanation, revealing his family was always broke because of his irresponsible parents. The flashback shows his parents constantly fighting, blaming each other for their gambling addictions until his mother finally decided to leave. With nowhere else to go, she took him to the only relatives she had left, the prestigious Miyakojima family. He was stunned by the massive estate, only then learning his mother was a Miyakojima, though her own parents had also been disowned. His mother then used a loophole, declaring that since she was the one disowned, her son was still technically part of the family. She promptly abandoned him there, leaving a young Tominari all alone in the massive, unfamiliar mansion. Against all odds, the head of the Miyakojima family accepted his mother's brazen argument and agreed to take him in. Even as a child, Tominari was appalled by his mother's complete lack of shame. He overheard the household staff gossiping, worried his mother's bad habits would be a terrible influence on their young lady, Narika. Unable to stand their harsh words, the young boy turned and ran away from the whispers. He wandered the massive estate, spotting a small girl practicing kendo under the porch. The young boy was completely lost, marveling at how endlessly the traditional house seemed to stretch on. Following the sound of determined shouts, he cautiously peeked around a corner to investigate. He found a young Narika in a dojo, panting and flushed from intense training with a wooden sword. With a fierce cry, she unleashed a powerful strike that completely obliterated the straw training dummy. Alerted by his presence, she spun around with a startled and demanding expression. Tominari was so surprised by her intensity that he stumbled back as she slammed the door shut. He nervously introduced himself, explaining he was only watching because he'd never seen a dojo up close. The boy clarified that he had just arrived at the mansion the day before. Her response was immediate and harsh, as she declared her intense dislike for anyone she perceived as weak. She immediately confronts him, repeating servant gossip that he's just a freeloader who does nothing but eat. With a determined blush, she declares that his new job will be to take care of her personally. And so his life as her attendant began, which often involved her screaming his name over a single bug. A weary but resigned Tominari would always show up, bug spray in hand, to deal with her latest emergency. He recalls how she would summon him at least 10 times a day for the most trivial of reasons. Despite the constant interruptions, he would always gently comfort the easily flustered girl. She would even run to him in tears, seeking comfort after being scolded by her own father. He would gently pat her head, always managing to soothe her after a difficult moment. His simple gesture was all it took to calm her down, leaving her blushing and content. But as soon as he was alone, he'd admit to himself that he was the one who really wanted to cry from the stress. The flashback continues with a young Narika, admitting she thinks he's stronger because he doesn't cry over bugs or scoldings. He realized then that while she was physically powerful, her emotional strength was a different story. Tominari understood that her high status left her isolated, with no one to share her burdens. She looked at him with resolve, declaring her wish to become a strong woman worthy of the Miyakojima name. But her determination faltered as she confessed she didn't have the courage to do it. Narika lamented that even at 10 years old, she was still too afraid to go outside by herself. He recalled his own father's warnings, which had also instilled a fear of the outside world in him. She then recounted seeing a classmate walking home alone from the safety of her family's car. With a deep blush, she admitted how intensely jealous she was of that simple act of freedom. Tominari then made a simple offer, suggesting she could just go out with him, which left her completely stunned. He holds out his hand, reassuring her that a short trip outside would be perfectly fine. A blushing Narika is moved by his kindness, softly uttering his name in disbelief. He takes her hand, confidently leading her out of the sprawling estate and into the town. She's immediately overwhelmed with excitement, marveling at the simple sights of the outside world. From watching fish in a pond to playing on swings, every new experience fills her with pure joy. Her curiosity is piqued by a small snack shop, and he offers to take her inside. She throws her arms up in the air, celebrating the incredible and exhilarating feeling of freedom. Inside, she discovers a common snack for the very first time, asking him what it is. The first bite is a revelation, her eyes widening with delight at the incredible taste. They wave goodbye to the friendly shopkeeper, with an ecstatic Narika promising they'll be back soon. He explains they snuck out a few more times, careful to avoid the watchful eyes of the household staff. But their secret adventures were eventually discovered, ending their brief period of freedom. Narika's furious father confronted the young boy, threatening him for putting his precious daughter in danger. The man used the incident as an excuse, roaring for them to get out of his house immediately. As he was led away, a tearful Narika could only watch, calling out his name in despair. And so he and his mother were unceremoniously kicked out of the Miyakojima estate. Narika was left behind, tearfully vowing to become strong in his absence. The flashback ends with Tominari revealing the simple truth. He and Narika are cousins. Overwhelmed with emotion, she continues to cling to him, repeating his name through her tears. He desperately tries to calm her down, realizing how bad it would look if anyone found them like this. She's so overcome with joy that her legs completely give out, leaving Tominari baffled. After carrying her to the infirmary, a staff member tells them a short rest should be enough. As Tominari tries to head back to class, a tearful Narika grabs his sleeve, pleading for him to stay. He looks down at her with concern as she continues to sob, clearly unwilling to let him go. She asks what happened to him, and he casually explains his parents just got back together. Narika admits how worried she was, while Tominari thinks about Hinako, concluding she's fine without him. She apologizes for never contacting him, admitting she had no way of finding his address. He reasons that even if she had, her family would have prevented any message from reaching him. Tominari then apologizes for getting her in trouble by taking her outside all those years ago. But she grabs him, insisting he has it all wrong and that he's the reason she's no longer a coward. She passionately insists that he was the catalyst for her personal growth. He playfully points out that despite her claims of change, she still seems quite shy. A flustered Narika admits that overcoming her shyness is still a work in progress. Her demeanor shifts to fierce pride as she reveals she ultimately won against her father. Tominari sighs, correctly guessing her strict father had kept her on a very short leash. She explains she had to master every martial art just to earn the right to go out without an escort. Narika beams with pride, celebrating the freedom she fought so hard to achieve. Her smile falters as she admits that her newfound freedom feels empty without someone to share it with. Tominari is left speechless, the weight of her lonely confession hanging in the air. He changes the subject, asking about the scary rumors surrounding her at school. which she nervously dismisses as misunderstandings. She explains with a blush that her family's reputation is the root of all her social problems. A flashback reveals her grueling childhood, forced to master every martial art under her family's strict code. Narika admits that because of her background, everyone assumes she's violent, making it impossible to make friends. She confesses that her intense nervousness around others causes her to make an intimidating face by accident. Tominari recalls that she's always been shy and unable to speak properly, a trait she's had since childhood. This led to rumors that she was a yakuza, with students thinking she was glaring at them when she was just nervous. She grabs onto him, desperately pleading for his help as he sighs at her compounding misfortunes. He looks down at the clinging girl, wanting to help but clearly hesitant about getting involved. His phone suddenly rings and he quickly pulls away to answer the urgent call. He explains to the caller that he's near the infirmary, vaguely mentioning that a student fainted. On the other end of the line, Shizune's voice cuts through, demanding to know his exact location. The maid explains his tracker showed he was away from Hinako, which immediately raised her concern. He sweats, realizing he's being monitored, as Shizune orders him to return to the classroom immediately. Knowing he can't linger, Tominari apologizes to Narika and prepares to make his exit. Shizune's voice turns cold, reminding him that his primary duty is to Hinako, no matter the circumstances. But Narika stops him, her expression serious as she asks why a commoner like him is at this elite school. He tries to bluff, claiming his parents won a massive gamble, but she's clearly not buying it. She reminds him that only the children of the rich and powerful can pass the academy's strict entrance exams. His lie crumbles as he realizes the school would never accept money from a source like gambling. Narika presses him, sensing he's hiding something and asking if there's a secret reason he can't tell her. Torn between his duty and his past, he apologizes for having to cut their reunion short. Narika grabs his arm in a panic, her eyes pleading as she asks if he's going to abandon her again. He tries to explain the urgency of the call, but she desperately begs him to wait, terrified of being left alone. A look of pained understanding crosses his face as he grasps the weight of her fear. He acknowledges that his absence is causing trouble, but his attention is fixed on the distraught girl before him. The memory of their traumatic separation resurfaces, revealing the deep-seated trauma behind her desperation. He turns back with a gentle smile, promising they'll meet again before she makes a familiar, comforting request. With a weary sigh and a slight blush, he finds himself unable to refuse her simple plea. She reminds him of their shared past, recalling how he used to comfort her just like this. He gives in, gently placing his hand on her head to soothe her just as he did when they were children. Narika melts under his touch, her expression blissful as she admits how calming his presence is. She confesses she'd given up hope of ever seeing him again, cherishing this reunion as a precious memory. He awkwardly points out that her emotional display makes her seem much younger than a second-year student. Tominari glances away, flustered by the intimate moment and the urgent need to leave. He apologizes for having to cut their reunion short, but she clings to his arm, unwilling to let go. Narika reassures him with a gentle smile, happy that they've at least found each other again. Their moment is shattered by a sweet voice from the doorway as Hinako asks what they're doing. Tominari freezes in shock, pushing Narika away as he recognizes his master standing there. He panics, demanding to know why Hinako is in the infirmary, with a startled Narika behind him. Narika quickly concocts an excuse as Tominari realizes Shizune must have sent Hinako to find him. Hinako calmly explains she felt unwell and decided to excuse herself from class. She then turns to a flustered Narika, sarcastically asking if she hit her head. Hinako reveals her true motive, admitting she came because she saw him patting Narika's head. A blushing Narika blurts out that she and Tominari have known each other for a long time. She stammers, trying to explain their history to a very unimpressed Hinako. In her panic, Narika reveals that Tominari lived with her when they were 10, shocking him. Hinako deadpans a question, focusing on the "for a while" part of the story. Narika passionately clarifies that he used to take care of her back in the day. With a blank stare, Hinako questions what exactly taking care of her entailed. Narika turns to Tominari, explaining she owes him a lot and was just overjoyed by their reunion. Hinako calmly processes the information before turning her attention back to Tominari. Narika eagerly leans in, inviting a stunned Tominari to come visit her home again. She quickly clarifies it's just a casual invitation, leaving him even more flustered. Tominari regretfully turns down her offer, explaining that it's not possible for him. Narika's face falls, heartbroken that they can't return to how things used to be. Hinako steps in, placing a hand on his shoulder and cheerfully announcing to a shocked Narika that he now works for her. He panics internally, realizing that explaining his job would expose Hinako's carefully hidden true personality. As Narika reels from the news, Hinako innocently asks him what the problem is with telling the truth. Tominari is torn, knowing that being honest about his situation would directly conflict with his duty to protect Hinako's secrets. Hinako looks down with a quiet, unreadable expression, simply asking why he's hesitating. He internally debates keeping his job a secret, but Hinako's presence forces his hand. Narika erupts in disbelief, completely blindsided by the revelation. From the infirmary bed, she demands to know what Hinako meant by him working for the Konohana family. A blush of pure jealousy spreads across her face as she clenches her fist, muttering how unfair it is. With a sigh of resignation, Tominari confirms that he is, in fact, Hinako's caretaker. Narika points an accusing finger at a stoic Hinako, shouting that she's stolen him away. She trembles with frustration, unable to finish her thought about her own history with him. Hinako calmly asserts her claim, stating that regardless of his past, he belongs to her now. With the situation handled, Hinako coolly suggests they return to class, noting that Narika seems perfectly fine. A flustered Narika quickly agrees as Hinako turns to leave, having completely won the confrontation. Tominari apologizes to a dejected Narika, explaining that as Hinako's caretaker, he can't defy her. Walking down the hall, he asks Hinako if she came all the way to the infirmary just to find him. She confirms it, admitting she faked being sick and got an escort since she's terrible with directions. He feels guilty and apologizes for neglecting his duty, which seems to surprise her. Hinako glances back thoughtfully before continuing down the corridor, her expression unreadable. He then questions her decision to reveal their connection, reminding her of Shizune's orders to be discreet. Tominari presses for an explanation, but she just gives a non-committal hum in response. With a deadpan look, she explains she simply felt the need to give Narika a warning. He's completely baffled by her choice of words as she turns away, puffing her cheeks in a blush. A thought suddenly strikes him as he looks at the flustered girl. Maybe she was actually jealous. He's lost in thought, recalling all the different, demanding sides of Hinako he's seen so far. She turns to him with a serious expression, asking him to declare whose caretaker he truly is. He confidently declares his loyalty is to her, and she seems satisfied with his answer. She glances back with a playful smile, suggesting they go get scolded by the maid as a team. Her carefree attitude sends him into a full-blown panic, imagining the worst-case scenario of being fired. Back home, Shizune calmly informs him he's not getting fired, explaining that transparency is actually the better option. She then admits their own failure, acknowledging they should have known about his past acquaintance at the school. He nervously probes for more information, asking just how much she knows about his history. She reveals their information is incomplete, surmising the Miyakujima family is actively suppressing the full story about him. Shizune turns away, concluding that it's now time for him to come clean with the whole story. Tominari considers his options, knowing he needs to strike a deal with Narika to keep things under control. Shizune instructs him to be upfront about his employment and secure Narika's cooperation, which he reluctantly agrees to. The maid provides him with a cover story. He's an apprentice living with them for corporate training. She then gives him a stern reminder that his top priority is protecting Hinako's carefully crafted public image. As another maid interrupts with paperwork, Shizune admits she'd rather have kept his job a secret to avoid future complications. She explains that having a male classmate living in the house could create scandalous rumors and hurt Hinako's marriage prospects. Tominari is left pondering the potential trouble as the household staff continues their duties around them. Hinako, who has been quiet until now, suddenly tightens her grip on him, catching him by surprise. Without looking up from her work, Shizune calmly addresses her young master. She points out Hinako's koala-like clinging, asking if there's a reason for her sudden attachment. Hinako buries her face in his chest, leaving a confused Tominari to wonder if this is about Narika. She looks up with a blush, quietly asking him to pat her head just like he did for his cousin. A hesitant Tominari agrees to her request, still under Shizune's watchful and unreadable gaze. He gently pats her head and she melts with a blissful smile as Shizune notes her master's strange new behavior. He apologizes for the situation, but the maid reassures him that she doesn't believe he's at fault. Tomonari is caught off guard by the maid's calm assessment, still comforting the surprisingly needy Hinako. Shizune's tone turns serious as she announces there's another important matter they need to discuss. She asks if something is wrong, noticing his flustered expression as Hinako continues to cling to him. The scene shifts to a new girl with a gentle smile, who warmly congratulates someone on their acceptance into the academy. Tomonari now sits at a table with Hinako and two other prominent students, as onlookers gossip about the elite gathering. The girl warmly welcomes him to the academy, leaving a flustered Tomonari to stammer his thanks. Meanwhile, other students gossip, completely clueless as to who this new guy is. Tomonari recalls Shizune's intimidating interrogation about his desire to hang out with classmates. He remembers trying to explain himself to the maid while Hinako clung to him possessively. Tomonari had reasoned that constantly refusing invitations would only make his new friends suspicious. Shizune had reluctantly agreed, offering her support as long as he gave them advance notice. The memory ends with him awkwardly patting a very clingy Hinako, who seems unwilling to let go. The next morning, the school bell rings, signaling the start of another day at the elite academy. Katsuya and Karen immediately approach his desk, once again asking if he's free after school. Having gotten permission, Tomonari confidently agrees, much to Katsuya's loud and celebratory delight. His friends immediately start planning, suggesting everything from a quick trip to Taiwan to somewhere more local. Relieved he got permission, Tomonari quickly texts Shizune his plans while his friends continue their debate. Their suggestions escalate to a trip to Kyoto, causing Tomonari to slump over, already exhausted by their energy. Katsuya finally suggests a more reasonable location, the Academy's own cafe, which Tomonari is shocked to learn even exists. Karen explains the on-campus cafe is a popular casual spot, a stark contrast to the Academy's more traditional high-class venues. Realizing his etiquette training is far from complete, he suggests the simple cafeteria cafe to avoid any social blunders. He nervously weighs his options, trying to navigate this new social world without making a mistake. Karen happily agrees to his simple suggestion, much to his visible relief. Feeling more confident, he generously suggests they can invite other people since the outing is in his honor. From the side, a quiet Hinako suddenly declares she's joining them, catching Tomonari completely by surprise. Tomonari is taken aback by her sudden decision, questioning if she'll really join them. Without hesitation, Hinako pulls out her phone, determined to make the necessary arrangements to go. He reminds her that even for a simple cafe trip, they'll still need Shizune's permission. She calmly eats her lunch, her quiet determination showing she's already made up her mind. On the other end of the line, Shizune calmly approves the tea party, noting it aligns with their plans to support him. Another girl expresses concern over Hinako's decision, but she dismisses it, confirming she's fine with the plan. With permission secured, Hinako informs the surprised Tomonari that two other girls, Taisho and Asahi, will be joining as well. He tries to reassure her that it's just a casual hangout, but she clarifies she only knows the others by name. Hinako suddenly grabs his jacket, her expression turning serious as she declares her unwavering intention to go with him. Her intense and possessive gesture leaves him completely flustered, stammering in surprise at her forwardness. A flustered Tomonari realizes their small hangout has now grown to a party of 4. As other students gossip about him joining the study meeting, Hinako gives him a sweet, encouraging smile. He blushes, recalling Narika's desire to make friends and wondering if she'll show up too. Deciding he has a moment to spare, Tomonari excuses himself to use the restroom before class ends. He glances back into the classroom, noticing a lonely Narika sitting by herself while everyone else socializes. She nervously rehearses a conversation, practicing how to ask someone about the tea party. Watching from the doorway, Tomonari notes how out of place she looks as she smiles to herself. He calls out her name and she whips around with a shocked expression, completely startled by his presence. Narika immediately grabs onto him, eagerly declaring she's free to talk as he tries to back away. Realizing how lonely she must be, he tries to calm the overly excited girl down. He suggests they move somewhere private as classmates gossip, shocked that the stoic Miyakojima even knows his name. Now outside, he apologizes for his abruptness, explaining he needs to clear the air about their last encounter. She points an accusing finger, declaring she hasn't forgiven him for abandoning her and calling him a traitor. Her anger dissolves into a flustered confession as she blurts out her desire to live with him again, shocking Tomonari. Immediately mortified, she begs him to forget her outburst as he notes her social skills have somehow gotten worse. He clears his throat, trying to steer the conversation back to the important matter of his current situation. Tominari begins to explain his cover story, stating that on paper, he's essentially been adopted. He elaborates for a confused Narika, claiming his new father is a CEO who sent him to study business with the Konohana family. She pouts, pointing out he could have done the same with her family, but he claims the Konohana name just came up first. He finishes his explanation, hoping she'll accept the story of him being an in-house apprentice. Narika surprisingly connects his cover story to a historical apprenticeship system, impressing him with her knowledge. He's relieved she's interpreted his situation in a way that keeps his secret with Hinako safe. She astutely points out that his standing as an adopted son is precarious, showing she understands his delicate position. He seizes the opportunity to invite her to the after-school hangout, leaving a flustered Narika stunned by the offer. Tominari formally asks if she'd like to join them at the cafe, hoping to include the lonely girl. Overcome with emotion, she tearfully accepts the invitation, shocking him with the intensity of her reaction. He awkwardly tries to comfort the crying girl, realizing just how much the simple gesture meant to her. She confesses that no one has ever invited her out before, and she feared she would graduate without making a single friend. After thanking him, she admits that her inability to make friends is just one of her many problems. She explains that her family's powerful name intimidates everyone, making her admire Hinako's natural ability to draw people in. Narika admits with a blush that she hates Hinako got to him first, despite her own distinguished name. She points out that unlike her, other students seem to have no problem approaching and talking to Hinako. Tominari grimly concludes that Hinako's entire friendly persona is nothing more than a carefully constructed act. Narika confesses she's intensely jealous of Hinako's social grace and wishes she could be the same. He admits that even he doesn't fully understand the reason behind Hinako's elaborate facade. Tominari explains that Hinako has simply perfected the art of being a flawless lady that everyone adores. A hopeful Narika suggests that talking to Hinako might be the key to learning her social secrets. Her hope turns to panic as she realizes with a jolt that Hinako will be at the cafe gathering too. He confirms that with Hinako joining, their small hangout has now grown to a party of 4. Narika spirals into anxiety, worrying she'll be awkward and that everyone will find her unpleasant as Tominari tries to calm her down. A flustered Narika bites her nails, frantically asking if her presence at the hangout is really okay. He tries to reassure her, confidently stating that everything will definitely be fine. The scene shifts as Tominari rushes to class, only to spot Tennoji Mirei talking with another student in the hallway. Mirei smiles graciously, explaining she was just helping a classmate with their luggage from day duty. She then turns her attention to Tominari, recognizing him from their previous encounter and questioning his presence. He blushes, privately admitting that she seems much kinder than her reputation suggests. With her arms crossed, Mirei correctly deduces that he must be the new transfer student. As he tries to leave for class, she stops him, directly asking about the rumor that he's been arriving with Hinako every day. He tries to explain their families are connected, but she scoffs, dismissing him as just another one of Hinako's followers. Panicked, he quickly clarifies that while she showed him around initially, they no longer travel to school together. Tominari is completely bewildered by her use of the term Konohana sect. Mirei clarifies it's just her personal nickname for the students who practically worship Hinako. He pictures an actual fan club, complete with banners, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the idea. A blush creeps across his face as he tries to wrap his head around this intense rivalry. He cuts straight to the point, asking if she hates Hinako, which catches her completely off guard. A flustered Mirei denies hating her rival, but struggles to articulate her true feelings. She begrudgingly acknowledges Hinako's good qualities, but only as a way to praise her own beauty and intelligence. Mirei then dramatically claims that Hinako's popularity is causing her own prestige to fade away. She passionately declares that she, with her family's longer history, deserves all the attention, not Hinako. Mirei turns to him with an unnerving smile, assuming he must be on her side since he's not one of Hinako's followers. He's left speechless as Mirei eagerly presses him for validation of her views. She lets out a theatrical laugh, guessing that Hinako's perfect image is just an act, a fact Tominari knows is surprisingly true. Mirei then wonders why Hinako is the one everyone flocks to, questioning if it's her feigned approachability. Tominari quietly observes that Mirei's own constant effort to be perfect might be what's pushing people away. She leans in with a blush, insisting that her own proud and aloof behavior is the proper way for an elite to act. Mirei suddenly gets defensive, flustered by the observation that she seems to know an awful lot about her rival. He recalls Narika's words, understanding how a powerful family name can create a wall between you and everyone else. She tries to play it off, quoting a battle strategy about knowing your enemy and attributing the line to Narika. The mention of his cousin's name makes Tominari pause, connecting the dots between the two girls. He has a sudden epiphany, realizing that Mirei's abrasive personality might just be a cover for the same deep loneliness that plagues Narika. He recalls how students believe only someone like Hinako could ever be considered Mirei's equal. Her proud facade crumbles as she shyly asks if he's free after school. Tominari realizes her intense rivalry might just be a desperate attempt to connect with someone. Her eyes widen in shock when he mentions that Hinako will be at the gathering. Seeing his chance, he casually invites her to the after-school tea party he's planning. She seems intrigued by the offer, but he drops the bombshell that her rival will also be there. Mirei immediately accuses him of trying to lure her into enemy territory with a normal invitation. Despite her dramatic outburst, a teary-eyed glance reveals her deep-seated vulnerability. He calmly confirms her suspicions, leaving her to process the unexpected social challenge. Trying to save face, she blushes and pretends she'll only go if Hinako personally begs her to. He plays along, suggesting Hinako might have mentioned it, and a flustered Mirei reluctantly agrees to participate. The scene shifts to the cafe, where Mirei is already justifying her presence with a battle proverb Tominari has heard before. The three most powerful girls in school are all present, with a tense Narika wondering why her rivals are even there. A bewildered Katsuya grabs Tominari, demanding to know how he managed to assemble this all-star lineup. He and Karen are completely stunned, as are the other students who can only stare at the unbelievable gathering. Tominari sheepishly admits he just went with the flow, unable to explain how he's connected to these powerful girls. Another student notes the rarity of seeing the heirs of the three great families all gathered in one place. A girl named Asahi clears her throat, reminding everyone that this is supposed to be Tominari's welcome party. She then turns to him with a warm smile, offering a belated congratulations on his transfer to the academy. Asahi and Taisho add that graduating from this school guarantees success, and they look forward to seeing what he accomplishes. A flustered Tominari stammers his thanks as Asahi suggests they all formally introduce themselves. Mirei goes first, confidently announcing her status as the heir to the powerful Tennoji group. Karen and Katsuya follow suit, revealing their families' respective businesses in retail and shipping. The attention shifts to a terrified Narika, who can barely get a single syllable out. Hinako gracefully introduces herself with a perfect, serene smile, maintaining her flawless image. Narika finally manages to introduce herself, but her nervousness causes her to stutter, which Tominari immediately catches. Seeing the awkward tension, Tominari decides to break the ice and introduce himself next. He trembles while giving his name and a fake backstory about his family's IT company, confusing his friends. He quickly tells his friends not to worry about his background, encouraging them to just act normally. Mirei then turns her attention to Hinako, pointedly mentioning they've met at a tea party before. Hinako casually agrees with Mirei's assessment, deciding to just speak normally. Mirei's eye twitches, immediately interpreting the remark as sarcasm, while Asahi nervously tries to intervene. But Hinako's response is disarmingly sincere, as she offers Mirei her genuine thanks. Asahi then takes her chance, timidly asking if the popular Hinako even remembers a classmate like her. With a flawless smile, Hinako not only confirms she remembers Asahi, but also praises her for lifting the class's spirits. The simple compliment completely overwhelms Asahi, who is moved to tears by the unexpected kindness. Hinako then turns her attention to the other student, Taisho, calmly confirming that she remembers him as well. A blushing Taisho eagerly asks for her opinion of him, putting Tominari on edge with his boldness. Taisho is so overcome with joy by her simple acknowledgement that he starts weeping, feeling emotionally fulfilled. She explains she admires him for treating everyone with equal kindness, elevating him to a saintly status in his own mind. Narika trembles with frustration, silently fuming that no one is paying any attention to her. Tominari leans in, quietly asking if she's ever actually spoken to any of their classmates before. She tries to save face, claiming she chooses to avoid social events, but he correctly whispers that she's just never been invited. He looks down, a wave of understanding washing over him as he grasps the depth of her loneliness. Realizing he needs to clear the air, Tomonari decides to explain their shared history to the group. But Narika beats him to it, revealing to a surprised Hinako that she and Tomonari have known each other since they were 10. Asahi and Taisho are completely taken aback by this unexpected connection between the two. She finishes her explanation, clarifying that their long history is the reason he invited her to join them. Tomonari watches her, a bit stunned but relieved that she's finally opening up to the others. She turns to him with a blush and an intensely awkward smile, which only succeeds in terrifying the other students. Tomonari steps in to defend her, explaining that she's just easily misunderstood and not a scary person at all. He adds with a gentle smile that she's just nervous because she spent most of her childhood alone. A flustered Narika clings to him, confirming his theory that the scary rumors are completely false. Mirei smoothly changes the subject, asking Narika if her family is in the sports goods business. She points out that everyone knows the Miyakojima family, and a simple background check would have debunked the Yakuza rumors. Mirei then puts Narika on the spot, asking why she's never at any of the school's social events. Narika nervously claims she's always training, then quickly deflects by asking about Hinako instead. The question is now directed at Hinako, as Mirei asks what she does with her free time at home. Hinako paints a perfect picture of studying and eating scones, while Tomonari internally scoffs at her lies about potato chips and naps. He then confirms their fathers are acquaintances, and Hinako adds they're now close enough to share a table, shocking Asahi. Asahi laughs at the revelation, but Tomonari remains suspicious, feeling like there's more to the story. An awkward silence hangs in the air as he sweats nervously, while Hinako calmly sips her tea. Katsuya playfully presses them, asking if a simple family acquaintance is really all there is to their relationship. He winks, teasingly telling Tomonari to stop being so suspicious and say something to clear the air. Their friends start to panic when neither of them denies the romantic implications, demanding an answer. A hand suddenly grabs Tomonari's shoulder, startling him and Katsuya out of their conversation. Hinako calmly sets down her teacup, coolly dismissing the idea that there's anything more between them. Tomonari quickly agrees, laughing it off and insisting he's not a good enough match for someone like her. His friends seem to buy the excuse, concluding that he's just been too busy with his studies for romance. Hinako quietly pouts at his self-deprecating comment, a reaction that doesn't go unnoticed by Tomonari. Hinako glares at a flustered Tomonari, calling him a liar for his self-deprecating comment. He tries to play it off with a nervous laugh, taking a sip of tea to avoid her intense gaze. Hinako calmly gets his attention, her voice cutting through the awkward silence. She then corrects his tea-drinking etiquette, demonstrating the proper, elegant way to hold the cup. His friends quickly cover for him, explaining he's still adjusting to the academy's high-class manners. A blushing Tomonari thanks her for the unexpected lesson, grateful for the guidance. Katsuya then brings up strange, commoner traditions, hilariously confusing, splitting the bill with kleptomania. He turns to Tomonari, eagerly asking if he knows any other interesting customs from his old school. Tomonari awkwardly explains the concept of everyone paying for themselves, a foreign idea to his wealthy friends. He then offers another piece of commoner wisdom, holding up 3 fingers to introduce them to the 3-second rule.